there's a saying which goes on in the VC space that the real work starts after you cut the check. It is after you make the investment, right? Generally, people who are good at secondary research don't really think that they have a skill in hand, but I think it's something which is, like you mentioned, definitely underrated and something which has definitely come to play at multiple places.
क्या आप भी वीसी या फाइनेंस में इंटर्नशिप या प्लेसमेंट करना चाहते हैं या फिर आप कंसल्टिंग और प्रोडक्ट मैनेजमेंट स्पेस को एक्सप्लोर करना चाहते हैं? Stay tuned for today's session. Hello folks, welcome to the series named The Placement Guide, where we help students to know about hiring processes of their dream companies and different career opportunities. Today, we have a very special guest amongst us whose name is Rudhir. He is a recent graduate from BITS Pilani and is currently working in Groww as an associate product manager. He has earlier done a couple of consulting, finance, and venture capital internships at Venture Highway, Titan Capital, JP Morgan, and KPMG, and many more. He was also the national finalist at various case competitions, including the prestigious KPMG Ideation Challenge. Truly, your profile is really very amazing, Rudhir.
Hey Madhur, thanks for having me and thanks for the very kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
So before we proceed, do like and share this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe the channel for more such videos. Let's deep dive into your journey, Rudhir. What is your biggest takeaway from your college experience at BITS Pilani?
Got it. So I think definitely BITS was like an experience of a lifetime, right? It's sort of very tough to point out just like one thing. But I remember, this one time I was thinking, just trying to think of a framework as to all of the things that have helped me be, wherever I am, right? So I could sort of boil down to, say, three major parameters, right? Curiosity, people, and place. And I think of it like a pyramid, right? Wherein curiosity trumps above these two, then comes, let's say people, and the third is place, right? Wherein the idea being that people that are naturally curious, right, are the ones that always look for the right questions, they ask the right questions, and eventually also ending up finding the right answers, right? So, let's say in my reference, this will be something like I was always curious about, what happens in finance or VC or product, right? So no matter where I am, no matter if I'm with the right set of people, I will always, if I'm curious enough, I will always go about looking for these answers, right? So I think these set of people, no matter what college, background, place they come from, they will always be able to, let's say, do something well for themselves, right? Then let's say as you move down the pyramid, right, you come to a set of individuals that might have a good network. That is, they have the people factor, right? They may not always be curious themselves, but just by the virtue of being with the right set of people, right, when those people try to find paths for themselves, or if the other set of people are curious, or if the network is curious in itself, automatically, they also end up bumping into all those opportunities, right? So let's say you may not be the most intelligent, curious person by yourself, but just being with the right set of people can really help you with that. And again, while place can play a role in it, but so let's say if you're from a good college, you naturally have a good network. But again, you can always build a good network even if you aren't from, let's say a prestigious college, right? I think the last is place. So let's say if you're not curious and neither do you have a good network, I think the only thing which can maybe save you is a good place. So let's say a good place does mean that opportunities come your way. I think even an average person at Pilani does end up doing pretty well for themselves. So I think that is purely by the virtue of place, right? But I think I do tend to categorize my learnings, my people, my learnings and my interactions with people into these three buckets. And I think try being on top of the pyramid, which is something which I try doing wherever I go, right? So I am trying to be curious as much as possible. I'm trying to network with the best set of people, and I make sure that eventually these two will help me land at the best place as well.
Yeah, that's a really nice framework that you shared: people, place, and curiosity. And definitely, curiosity plays a very important role in our journey in the long term.
Yeah.
So can you share about the shortlisting process for your consulting internship at KPMG that you did?
Got it. So for KPMG, I mean, it's more of an interesting anecdote, right? So it wasn't a very conventional process, and I think this is also something which I'll, would love to see other people following, right? So back in 2019 to 2020, right? So KPMG was hosting its annual, innovation challenge called the KPMG Ideation Challenge, right? it's again a global challenge, happens across multiple countries, within, individual KPMG offices are mentoring people who are part of this competition. There are multiple levels, obviously close to, I think close to 1,000 people apply for it, right? And I think over multiple levels, people end up being churned out, and only like some people make it to the finals, right? So yeah, I mean, again, my curiosity sort of got me to this place. We were working on a problem statement wherein we had to build products, SaaS products for the small and medium businesses. Specifically, that can bring analytical solutions to these spaces, right? And yeah, it was through this competition wherein, although we couldn't really end up winning this, but I think my curiosity got me to this place. The people factor came in, and I was able to network with, let's say, some amazing partners at the firm, and that helped me reach to the right place, which was, let's say, my KPMG internship. Basis the curiosity and the networking which we did. So yeah, that is how I got the internship. It wasn't a very conventional way, but I think that's the only way to beat the return of a normal system, right? If you go out of the system and if you look for such opportunities. So yeah, that is how KPMG happened for me.
Yeah, that's a really nice experience. So what is your biggest learning from your Titan Capital internship experience?
Got it. So, again, I think firstly, when Titan happened, it was a pretty novel experience, right? So, this was around the time when doing a VC intern was sort of becoming the new normal. Largely catered to the fact that while there were a lot of startups coming up, on the other end, in terms of supply of capital, India had conventionally seen very few VCs being there, right? And as and when this problem started being addressed, we saw a lot of micro VCs coming into the forefront, right? And I think Titan Capital is also one of the leading micro VCs in India. So yeah, again, I'd say that it was through curiosity that I started reading up on VC. Titan had approached our campus for an opportunity, applied through the normal portal, went through the application process, and that's how I got the internship, right? But I think as part of my learning, I'd say that this was again a pretty novel experience, and I think very much close to what you would expect an actual investment analyst to do at the firm, right? So if you largely look at the various verticals of work, it starts right from say building hypotheses around what markets and spaces we'd like to invest in, sourcing deals in certain markets, as to when it comes to meeting interesting people, knowing about them, obviously discussing the feedback with the team, brainstorming whether the idea, the product, the market really is something which we'd want to invest in. And then finally the due diligence process, wherein you are conducting background checks, wherein you're evaluating the space once more, maybe looking at parallel countries wherein similar players might have existed, right? So I think in all those four buckets got this exposure, and yeah, it was pretty realistic, pretty close to what you'd expect like a real investment analyst to do.
Yeah, that seems amazing experience doing both the due diligence and the deal sourcing part in much depth. So can you tell about your work role at JP Morgan internship and key learnings from that experience?
Got it. Right. So again, JP Morgan happened, in the peak of the lockdown. So the entire internship was purely online. So, couldn't really go to the office or meet a lot of people in office, right? But I think from a very high level point of view, if you look at any bulge bracket bank, like let's say JP Morgan, Nomura, KPMG, JP Morgan, Nomura, Credit Suisse, etc. A lot of these banks, will have like, let's say 4 to 5 major verticals, right? Let's say the investment banking part, they'll have trading desks, they will have let's say their quant teams that are building strategies where to invest in, and they also have their risk teams, right? So my role was specifically under the risk team. Under the risk team, there was this special team called the risk controllers team, right? So just to give you a bit of background, when the financial crisis hit the United States in 2008, the federal bank did pass a law, or a policy. I mean, I don't know what exact word to use, but they did pass a policy, that mandated all banks to share their risk numbers. By that, what it meant was that, what is the kind of adequacy which these banks have, that in case such a crisis ever occurs again, what is their exposure to risky instruments, risky markets, risky countries, etc. Right. So as part of that mandate, we had to send out quarterly reports. So that was purely my job, right? Pulling the numbers from the trading desk, matching it back to, let's say, our ledger, figuring out how much exposure we have to equities, to bonds, to various other securities, checking as to which numbers seem to be higher, which numbers seem to be lower, and just making sure that the final report which goes out conveys the appropriate information. So it was more around reconciliation and building models, data pipelines to be able to match those numbers. So I think heavier on the data part, but yeah, it did have an angle of finance when it came to general understanding about various instruments and bonds.
Yeah, that seems quite interesting, like analyzing the risk factors and trying to prevent any such happenings that happened during 2008. Even
Yeah.
I saw that JP Morgan had a very good time during 2008 in comparison to other banks in USA, where all banks were struggling a lot, whereas JP Morgan quite outperformed them by the good strategy during that time.
Correct. No, definitely. I think the idea is that, you know, while sometimes on the face of it, it seems that, if a bank has, let's say, a lot of exposure to multiple countries, instruments, it seems that the bank is doing well. But then it all matters as to how sensitive they really are to, such adversities, right? So I think a lot of other banks at that time didn't really take into account the sensitivity part of the markets. And I think that is wherein, banks like JPM really triumphed over the other banks.
Yeah, a lot of companies often get into the trap of over diversification quite frequently.
Right, definitely.
So, how was your typical day look like in Venture Highway as a student venture partner?
Got it. So just to give you a brief background, Venture Highway is also a VC fund. They're also based in India. They're right now deploying their third fund. So again, I'd say that the day was very similar to how things worked in Titan, right? Again, the nature of work remained the same. I think with the additional factor being that I think in VH one good thing was that there was a lot of mentoring and feedback which used to happen basis of performance, right? So I think VH did recognize that, while we are all students, and, while we're obviously trying to do the best to our capacities, they also try to specifically nurture us by, arranging sessions with, let's say, partners which they had sitting in the valley. Or, so if you know Aviral Bhatnagar from the success of AJVC,
Yeah,
he's also part of the investment team. So yeah, I've had a lot of calls with him as well, wherein he was, personally trying to give us feedback, review our performance, discuss his ideologies of how we evaluate founders, markets, how we sense what is the right timing for a certain market, right? So I think those in specific were sort of pretty helpful. Another difference, I think, on the nature of the work was that I also got to work on portfolio support. So I think that is another vertical wherein, after investing in companies. So again, there's a saying which goes on in the VC space that the real work starts after you cut the check. That is after you make the investment, right? So did end up working with one of the portfolio companies in manufacturing tech, wherein we had to build a market entry strategy for them into the US markets. So that was also sort of a similar to a consulting like exposure which we had, but this time with a smaller, more aggressive company. So yeah, I think overall those were a few differentiators when it came to my venture heavy experience.
yeah, I think Venture Highway experience would have been your one of the best experience, like learning from so many inventors, so many industry experts, and doing all different kinds of works, including the portfolio part.
Right, I think definitely. I mean, no matter where I've gone, I think it's always been a different sort of an experience. I think people have their own opinions, their own journeys and life learnings, and I think all of it is valuable. I think what really matters is how curious you really are at the end of the day to be able to extract and learn as much from these people.
So, can you share the interview process that happened for the Venture Highway program?
Right. So I think first, like a bit of disclaimer. So right now, the Student Venture Partner Program, which VH has, is like a pretty close program, right? They only approach a few campuses. I'm sure that in the times to come, they might as well want to open it. But since they are initially just trying it with a few colleges, which is why it's restricted right now. But to talk more about the process, so it's something very similar to what you might expect from a typical VC process, right? So the initial part was wherein we had to submit a resume, talk about a motivation to join VC. That was the first part, and that is also the initial filtration took place. The second part was wherein we had to actually source a deal, source a seed stage level startup, that let's say has not raised more than 1 million, that eventually Venture Highway might also want to invest in, and discuss as to basis our own parameters as to why we think that this is a good space, a good team, a good market, a good product to invest in. Right, and again come up with metrics that we are evaluating the startup on the basis on, and eventually make recommendations to the investment team at Venture Highway. So that was there, and I think the last one was again with Aviral himself, wherein it was more about discussing my motivation, my personal journey, along with, a few quick questions around what spaces excite me personally. If I were to build a startup, how exactly would I do it? And, again, sort of just quick thinking, thinking on the feet. So that was the last round.
Yeah, that seems quite a comprehensive shortlisting process by them. And also, I think your Titan Capital internship would have been quite helpful in this process.
Correct. So definitely, given that I've had some previous VC work experience, I did, I think I was lucky enough to use that as well when it came to the evaluation process. But I think, I'd rather say that when it comes to hustling for deals, when it comes to deal sourcing, right, I think a lot of it is about, how well can you really surf the internet to be able to, come up with these amazing hidden dark horses, which people might not be, aware of. So I think that way, yes, while I did have a feel about, what markets to look for, towards the end of the day, I think you have to put in the hard work, right? No matter where you are in the VC world, no matter how many internships or how much of work you've had, deal sources is I think something which always, requires a lot of time and effort that way. So yeah, I think, but that way, yes, it did play a role, is what I'd say.
Yeah, so Googling is one of the most underrated skill in the industry.
Correct. No, I think definitely secondary research, for that matter of fact, is I think something which I've had to do even during my time at KPMG, my time working at multiple competitions at VH, at Titan, etc. So I think definitely, as a skill, it's generally people who are good at secondary research don't really think that they have a skill in hand, but I think it's something which is, like you mentioned, definitely underrated and something which has definitely come to play at multiple places.